Welcome back to Mystara, folks, and welcome back to the Savage Coast, as this week we start in the final products made for the Red Steel setting, and the only one left that TSR didn't release for free is a PDF online. The Savage Baronies go into slightly more detail into the aforementioned territories than the original box set did, so get ready for that one Spanish lesson you took back in the 6th grade. I'm Mr. Welch, and we're headed to the Savage Baronies. The box set was released in 1995 and was written by Tim Beach, who at this time was writing a massive number of books for TSR. Paul Jacques did the cover art, and that is Tim Beach on the cover fighting the dragonfly lizard abomination. Randy Post and Dee Barnett split the interior art. It does include 2 books, the main book and the adventure Divided We Fall, which is the first thing you'll notice is the image is just a flipped image of the bugbears that first appeared on the basic module compilation In Search of Adventure. There's a CD involved that's just ambient noises to help the players get into the mood for adventuring in the Savage Baronies, and this was later merged into the CD from the Red Steel box set to create a CD created for noise for the entire setting. There's also a full color map as well as some adventure handouts and a party of sample adventurers on the additional sheets. The main book is the standard 64 pages for a source book, with a third of that covering the history of the Baronies and a couple of pages devoted to the rules for dueling and a crash course in pronouncing Spanish and Portuguese words, as well as a small section on the Immortals. The rest of the book is divided mostly between the 9 baronies and goes into a little detail about each of the nations. Each book gets about 4 pages of information each on what's contained, and the book starts talking about the baronies on page 23 and stops on page 60. That's 37 pages to cover 9 distinct nations. That's the biggest problem with this book, is that it handicaps itself severely by not giving it a lot of time to talk about the subject that it was written about. I made mention that you're going to need to pronounce Spanish words to read this book well, and I'm not kidding. Of the 9 baronies, you got 2 based off of Portugal, 6 based on Spain or South America at various times, and one that's obviously the Republic of Texas. There's tildes everywhere in this book. I don't know any Portuguese, and my Spanish is restricted to Señorita dos más cervezas, por favor, or Peligro por ajale hombre lobos en mi baños. Only Cimarron uses English for its locations and title, because that one's obviously Texas. There's a lot of overlap in the Savage Baronies from the material in the Red Steel box set. One issue this book has is the baronies are tiny compared to, say, Karamikos or Darrican. The city of Specularum dwarfs most of the baronies combined just with the population. These aren't baronies, after all, not full-blown countries. If you combined all of them together, you would get the population of one of the smaller known world nations. The book does go into much more detail on the religions of the area, something that wasn't touched on much in the Red Steel source material. One thing highlights how immortals work behind the scenes from nation to nation is the fact that several immortals are known by different names just in the different baronies. There's 5 that are worshipped by most of the territories, and they use other names from what they're known in the known or hollow worlds. Thor is the general, Terastia is the judge, so on. There's a few specific to certain baronies. Ixion and Vanya are only allowed to be the ones worshipped in Narvaez. Trigger-happy Cimarron throws mad respect towards Cagiar, the god of the Forge, and the obviously Moorish-inspired Saragon worships Al-Khalim. The continuity issues you're going to find in the Savage Baronies are the sudden introduction of the Ispin people, or Espin people, depending on what part of the baronies you're talking about, who are supposed to be based on the Spanish, obviously. The Ispins moved from Thyatis to the Baronies not long ago and are the primary human culture you're going to find there. Of course, the Ispins were left somehow entirely out of the Thyatis book, as they were created for the Savage Baronies to explain where all these people suddenly came from. It does make it hard to reconcile for the purists, as there's no Spanish culture in Thyatis at all, being almost entirely Byzantine in nature. You've got the Belkades elves, which are obviously Spanish in nature, but their background is that they came from a continent on the south and showed up hundreds of years before the Savage Baronies were populated. Nobody really knows where the Belkades came from. They just kind of showed up one day and settled in Glantry, and that was it. Then you've got the half-elves showing up because this is a 2nd edition sourcebook, which I believe is the 3rd version of what happens when elves and humans get it on, since Mystara started explaining where half-elves came from. I've always kept to myself that the half-elves of the Savage Coast are an entirely new race created through the immortal magics of the Red Curse, and that the elves and humans still follow the normal rules for that the child is the race of the parent of the child's sex. So when the Red Curse started, everyone of elven and human mixed blood became a half-elf. If you wanted to be a half-elf from the start, you have to be a child of one of those people. Otherwise, you still follow the same rules for what happens when elves and humans do the nasty. I might want to come up with half-elf rules for Beckme one day. I've always liked the idea that creating a new race required powerful immortal magics rather than just mixing and matching who you're sleeping with. That was one of the biggest complaints of 2nd edition Mystara, making it fit the new 2nd edition rules, chewed up and spit out a lot of the existing flavor and history. The book does add a bit more to the existing lore, but not much because of the space issues. Each nation talks about its rulers and how some of the settlements got there, but again, tiny domains make for not a lot of things to talk about in terms of the various cities and such. Each entry talks about how the domains handle religion, how it treats the afflicted, those who are greatly afflicted by the Red Curse. It talks about what the parts of the baronies are free from the curse, but I do wish the map would have shown exactly where the Red Curse had spread and what towns were free of it. Biggest issue with the baronies is they are based heavily on just 3 cultures. Portugal gets Vila Verde, which seems to be Brazil, while Texieres is Portugal proper. Then you get Moorish Spain, Inquisitorial Spain, Scientific Renaissance Spain, Artistic Renaissance Spain, and Conquistador Spain. Rounding it out, you've got Guadalante, which is similar to Chile and Argentina, and then there's Cimarron, which is the Republic of Texas. There's very little cultural variation between the baronies, with just a few of the lands being equivalent of nations hundreds of years apart technologically. The adventure tied to the Savage Baronies is a MacGuffin hunt called Divided We Fall. The humanoid hordes are coming to Saragon to destroy it once and for all, so the party has to find and help a local hero get the lost artifact that will help him turn back the horde and save the barony until the next invasion. There's a lot of sneaking around with a massive battle at the end, because the mask does let a few goblins through that the party has to take care of. It's pretty average as far as adventures go, but it's a quick one that can serve for a night's entertainment. Finding the Savage Baronies is a little tricky because it's a box set. It's tricky, but it's not expensive. The box set came at the end of TSR's Mystara support. There wasn't a lot of demand for it. You can find the books in the box for about $30. You can buy the books by themselves without CD or map for about $20. There's a PDF for $5 on DriveThruRPG, but again, you're not getting the CD. Fortunately, like I mentioned, the CD isn't needed for the adventure. So if you want to read them, you can probably get by with the PDF, but the full box set isn't that expensive. Savage Baronies was a hard one to review because there wasn't much to review. Much of the information was already covered in the Red Steel source books. It's 99% fluff, with some of the fluff seeming to be cut and paste from the original source book. If you want to play in a setting with a heavy Spanish influence, this is great, but it does seem redundant. There's no new legacies, no spells, no weapons. There's only a couple of monsters that's new, and that's it. I really don't know what the point of the book was. This seems to be extra ideas left over from the original Red Steel box set that they decided to throw together and put into another box set. Instead of having a 64-page book in the Red Steel box set, they could have gone to 96 and taken everything out of this one, and you'd have the same product. Next week, we're jumping to the first of the 2 free books that TSR released when Red Steel died, The Orc Peninsula. They were going to publish it, but when the line died, they just put everything out online for free that wasn't published. It's got new races and new cultures that were hinted at the Red Steel source book, but they were never seen. So you can thank the Vaults of Pandios for preserving the lost titles. So until next time, remember the Alamo.